welcome to another Substack Live. I'm Jon Fleischman. Obviously, you already know that. We're here at sodoesitmatter.com, where we're all California politics all the time. I guess the first thing that I'll tell people is I'm getting ready to give make an announcement in a little bit, but we're going to be doing we're not doing Substack Live on election night because I'm want to be covering election coverage, and I'm doing a lot of radio shows and news shows that night. But on the third, I'm sorry, on the fourth, the day after the election, we're going to do a Substack Live. I'm going to have a couple special guests, and we're going to be talking about what happened on election day in California. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but we're going to be talking about it to the best ability to do so. Because if you haven't followed this already, and I wrote about this once before, election day in California does not exist. We have voting month that occurs for 4 weeks before the election, as everyone has live ballots in their hands, and then we have like 4 weeks after the election where the ROVs are counting the ballots. And so, as we're about to talk about the governor's race, it's entirely possible that we will be going to bed many nights after election day in California without really understanding in a significant number of races, including the governor's race, who's actually on the November ballot. I was just talking with John Park, the vice chairman of the state Republican Party, last night. I hauled him to a Dodger game, which was awesome, by the way. We got to see Shohei Ohtani actually pitching. He pitched a no-hitter for his part, and he actually hit a leadoff home run in his own game. That's only the third time that's ever happened in baseball. The other two times were also Shohei Ohtani. So there you go. But anyways, you guys don't sign up to hear me talk about the Dodgers. Dan Kramer does, but I don't think anyone else does. But it was a great game to go to. Anyways, John was telling me that the California Republican Party has scheduled a victory press conference for the day after the election, or the day after the June election. So that'll be fun because it'll be interesting to see who they've decided has won and has a victory in the primary. Maybe it'll be Sonia Shaw. That would be amazing. But that having been said, it brought back memory lane to the point where before Prop 14 was passed in 2010, it always used to be the case that both major political parties would have an event in somewhere 2 days afterwards where you get that photograph with the entire ticket, because you would know with some definition who your nominees were, and that would happen. It doesn't happen anymore that way. Anyway, so we're talking about the governor's race. I can't talk about the governor's race without mentioning two things first. The first thing that I'll mention, which I've talked about before and I've written about before, I've endorsed no one in the governor's race. I like Steve Hilton and I like Chad Bianco, and I think, frankly, either one of them would be an awfully a great governor, especially compared to all these very progressive left-wing Democrats and vanilla pudding Matt Mahan that are running. I don't think that's even a close call. That having been said, I wrote in a column last week, which has now been between the column I wrote on the California Post, what I put here on Substack, on other places. I've now had over 700,000 people read the column that I wrote where I voted for Steve Hilton. And I didn't vote for Steve Hilton because I think he's better than Chad Bianco. I voted for Steve Hilton because it's fairly obvious from all the polling that the only Republican that has a chance of being in the runoff into November is Steve Hilton. So I guess I didn't write a piece, but I could have written a piece called The Mental Primary, which is what we're left to. Thanks to Prop 14, there's no longer actual primaries. And so I believe there was a mental primary. And in my mental primary for Republicans, Steve Hilton won that primary because now we're in the final push and we need to get a Republican into the top two in order to secure victories for important items like the Save Prop 13 ballot measure, the voter ID ballot measure, competitive races for Congress, a Senate, and Assembly, competitive races for city council, school board. Those all depend on a robust Republican turnout in November. And needless to say, if you don't have a Republican at the top of the ticket, it can really negatively impact Republican turnout. And conversely, if you've got let's say you've got Becerra and Steyer in the runoff. Let's just say that you have that. That's what we call the rat poison versus battery acid. Which one do you want to ingest, right? But imagine both of those people doing all of their get out the vote drills, each of them trying to get all their liberal supporters to the polls, while at the same time there is no real effort by the Republican Party to get a candidate to get to the polls that is championed by a Republican candidate, because there is none. So this is why it's important to consolidate. Everyone needs to have finished conducting their mental primary, and that's over. And God bless Chad Bianco. He's not going to want to acknowledge there's a mental primary. I've met Chad Bianco. I've interacted with him. I did a podcast interview with him. He is a run through the tape kind of a guy. So he's not about to go, well, I can't make it. I'm telling all my supporters to get behind Hilton. It's not going to happen that way. And then also, I should probably add, I don't know if you all saw it, but Hilton wrote a column in the California Post where he urged Chad Bianco to drop out and endorse him. And understanding how to motivate people is a pretty important thing. And I don't know about the rest of you, but if I was running against somebody for anything and they called on me to drop out, I'd be like, screw you. I'm not going to drop out. So really, at the end of the day, I don't think that was a very artful way to deal with it. I would really spend time talking to supporters of Chad Bianco and basically saying, look, you've been supporting Bianco. I need you to show a path. Anyways, the other thing, besides the fact that I think that Republicans at this point need to rally behind Hilton to secure a spot in that general election, the other thing that I want to talk about is that PPIC just came out with a survey. Those of you who are watching politics closely already know that this happened, but they came out with a survey. Oddly, this survey was in the field May 14th through 18th. So it's kind of a weird deal. I'm telling you, they just came out with a survey, but it's not new survey data. I don't know if the reason why they waited to put the survey out all the way until May 28th is because of internal bureaucracy. That's how long it takes for them to button it up, put it in a format that they want to release, and do their big PPIC grand press conference. Or if, frankly, there were other reasons why they didn't want to put it out. But so from the period of time of May 14th to May 18th, which is now a full 10 days ago when it closed, 2 weeks ago when it started. At that time, they had Becerra at 23%, Steve Hilton at 20%, Tom Steyer down a little bit at 15%, and then Bianco all the way down at 13%, with Katie Porter at 12%, and all of the other candidates and people who don't know who they're voting for, which is only 2%, all the other candidates combined had 15%. So as you can see, there's a winnowing taking place, but you have to ask yourself what's happened over the last 2 weeks that would have impacted these numbers. And frankly, I think Tom Steyer's had a very strong campaign in the last couple of weeks. And so I wouldn't be surprised if his numbers are up. And again, that's the competition that we have right now. The competition in my mind is not whether or not Steyer beats Becerra or Becerra beats Steyer. It's whether Steyer and Becerra together beat Steve Hilton. And again, we end up with battery acid versus rat poison, and we're stuck with an awful choice for the future of California. By the way, we may be resigned to a bad choice come November. This is a very blue state. And so Steve Hilton making the runoff helps us with all of those other down ticket items. But something pretty amazing and crazy would have to happen in order for the Republican to win in November. But we just saw crazy. If that implosion of Eric Swalwell had happened at a time where it was Swalwell, running Swalwell running against Hilton, and then Swalwell imploded. That's the kind of thing that could propel a Hilton. I see a comment from Red Fire, whoever you are. I hope you have red hair. Steyer would be awful, as would Katie. I'll be honest with you. They're all awful. Believe it or not, there's an actual saving grace to Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom is awful. Gavin Newsom is terrible, but Gavin Newsom is governed by a couple of things that make him better than all these other candidates, one of which is his own ambition. And the other part of which is that Gavin Newsom likes to be seen as the adult supervision. So on a few items, it's hard to discern. On a few items, he will exercise a veto on occasion. All these people running, whether it's Becerra is awful, Katie Porter is awful, Steyer is mega awful. These are all people that will be more progressive and more left-wing and more ideological than Gavin Newsom is already. So understand The only Democrats running, I believe, that would have put the brakes on relative to Gavin Newsom would be Antonio Villaraigosa, who's got no shot, and Matt Mahan, who's got no shot. Those two are a little bit more moderate than Newsom. These other three, including Becerra, are all to the left of Newsom. So, buckle up for that. We'll see what happens. So, there are a couple of more surveys that are due out. Like right now, they're almost due out. The one that's going to be the most interesting is going to be, I guess it's I think there's still, it's a Berkeley IGS. Still has one more gubernatorial survey coming out. I find them to be very credible, very good. And hopefully they're not going to have this long lag time. It would give us one more indicator, but um, we just got to get ready. It's going to happen. And this is a good time to talk about the situation with the Democrat turnout versus Republican turnout. I'm not going to get in the weeds. I wrote on this. You can find it by just going to the So Does It Matter main site and going into the if you just go into the there's a button for the what do they call it? Not the archive button, and just type in turnout. That'll pop. And anyways, in there I go over how the turnout numbers are somewhat depressed for Democrats, and it's obvious because I checked around with friends around the country. This is not happening anywhere else. This is a California issue, and what's happening is Republicans are turning out a little bit higher than usual, and Democrat turnout has been lower than usual. And if you go down and study and get into the weeds as to who is it that's not turning out, there are a lot of likely and very high propensity Democrat voters who are still holding on to those ballots. So the bad news is, I think those people are going to vote. They're not going to not vote, but I do think that they're waiting because they have been convinced that there is a possibility of two Republicans locking out the Democrats in the general election. And so I think they're waiting to figure out, who the heck do I vote for, to make sure that it's not Bianco and Hilton. And to be clear, the odds of Bianco and Hilton both making it to the runoff are so small that I would challenge you to get out a quarter and flip it like 100 times. And you tell me, in any of those 100 times, did it actually stand on its edge? Because those are the odds. I think there just aren't enough Republicans in California to be able to boost both Bianco and Hilton high enough to get up into the mid 20s. It just doesn't have. And if you think about it, Prop 50, which passed in the special election last November, the split was roughly 60-40, 40% voting no. That's your hard line vote. That's with major advertising framing it as a Trump referendum. Roughly 40% of Californians stuck with the president's side. And of course, the direct comparison would be the general election in 2024 when Trump and Harris were on the ballot. And again, it was roughly 60-40. So, our two, hold on a minute, my screen went dark. That's what I get for not touching it. Our two Republicans are splitting up 40% of the vote. So you do the math. It's hard to top out any higher than 18, 19%, because there's going to be stragglers that go elsewhere. That's just the way it is. Anyways, so this turnout issue becomes very relevant because if the Democrats can't pick it up at the end, it's going to have ramifications not only in the governor's race, but all the down ticket races as well. I'm keeping a close eye on the District 5 supervisor race here in Orange County because that's a high profile race. And I could tell you now that if the Democrat turnout doesn't increase in that district, Katrina Foley, the incumbent supervisor, is going to be serving her last 6 months in office. I do think a lot of them will turn. In fact, I think we're going to see this kind of opposite of the norm. We've gotten used to the last few years a situation where when the election actually happens, Republicans tend to show up more on election day rather than Democrats. And I think you're going to see a much more even turnout, or even a more higher turnout for Democrats on election day, because they've been holding their ballots. We will see how it goes. So anyway, governor's race, the most important takeaway that I would have for people that are watching, but of course you guys already know this, vote for Steve Hilton, not because he's better than Chad Bianco, but because the mental primary is over. And there's only one Republican that's in the pole position to try to get to the runoff. It's not Chad Bianco. And I feel bad for him. It could have been him, but it's not him. And I just don't think there's enough time left to change things. He will tell you that all of the surveys that we're relying on are all cooked by the books. They're all crap. It's all part of the internal process of trying to make sure that someone like Chad Bianco can never get elected. If that's where you find yourself, I'm not telling you not to vote for him. Maybe I should say I am, but I'm certainly telling you who I voted for. So, anyways, and then Jim, I see your note. We're getting ready to talk about the LA mayor's race here in a second. So, matter of fact, I guess the second is here. So, Jim Lacey, who's one of we love Jim Lacey. Jim Lacey, if you don't know Jim, you should be following him on Substack. Just type in James Lacey in Substack. He's got a great Substack. He's been a great dear friend of mine for many, many, many years. And Jim says, I question the UC Berkeley LA Times turnout model in Los Angeles and their poll today showing Pratt in third place. I have less respect for them than you may have. Well, you don't know what respect I have for them or not. I'm talking about a different survey, PPIC, right now. Recall how they flubbed the November 2020 ballot props, getting maybe 4 measures wrong. All right, Jim, you brought it up. Let's talk about the survey that just took place in Los Angeles. That's hold on, I'm going to pull it up here. So the LA Times has a partnership with the IGS folks out of Berkeley. That's the group, by the way, that I said is going to have one more survey coming out. I guess that's where Jim says I may have more respect for them. They did a survey. I have not dug into the methodology. Jim has. Their survey shows Karen Bass at 26%. Nithya Raman, the left-wing DSA city council candidate, at 25%, and Pratt, Spencer Pratt, at 22%. Compared to their last survey, these are significant increases for Raman and Pratt, and Bass has +1. We'll talk about that in a minute. Red Fire, this imaginary red warrior wearing red outfit with red hair, or I guess they're just a Republican. Anyways, you want recommendations for lieutenant governor, treasurer, controller, secretary of state? You got a pen? Lieutenant governor, I'm voting for Gloria Romero. For treasurer, I am voting for Jennifer Hawkes. For controller, I'm voting for Herb Morgan. And for secretary of state, I'm voting for Don Wagner. For superintendent of public instruction, Sonia Shaw. So I can repeat those again. I haven't really put out a voting guide. That's not very exciting to me, so I haven't done it, but I suppose I could do it. And obviously, I already told you for Steve Hilton, I'm recommending a vote for Steve. That for governor. Anyways, let's talk about the LA mayor's race. First and foremost, Jim may have some good critiques about whether or not what's true and what's not true and what they're picking up and not picking up. Let me start with the obvious. If they're polling Karen Bass at 26%, they're not going to be so off that even Jim wouldn't agree that that's an incumbent with big problems. Anytime an incumbent is being held down to below 50% is bad news for an incumbent. But if you're an incumbent that's being held down even into the mid 30s, let alone the mid 20s, that means that people, a vast majority of those people that are being contacted are rejecting your leadership and think you're doing a poor job. Uh, I guess I should probably take an opportunity at this point to level some fire on Caruso, Rick Caruso. He ran for mayor 4 years ago, famously spent vast sums of money. I'll give you an anecdotal story because I helped do some political voter contact in Orange County. I do independent expenditure work, so I don't really work for candidates. And Caruso was doing so much voter contact and so much mail that the places where I was getting mail printed in Orange County were saying, hey, if you've got stuff, we need extra lead time because the Caruso campaign is buying up all of our press time. That's how much he had literally used up all the print shops in Los Angeles County and was coming into Orange County to do more printing. Anyways, I bring up Caruso because Caruso was actively flirting with a campaign for mayor for months and months and months. If you watched him on Instagram or social media, everything was pointing towards him running again. He ultimately decided not to, but what he successfully did was he really kept the field from developing a real I think, credible challenger to the mayor. And then what happens is at the very end, Spencer Pratt jumps in. And I'm not trying to say that Spencer Pratt isn't credible. Um, what I am saying is that Spencer Pratt, I think with his unique campaign of social media, has really impressed a lot of people. It's translated to the raising of some money. I've written a lot about this in the California Post, which, by the way, if you're not going to the California Post, you should check it out. Maybe I'm biased. I am their most prolific guest columnist. I've now written, I think, 30 columns for them since they launched, which is more than anyone else. I have written a lot. They're kind of the newspaper of record on the LA mayor's race that I'm following. And so I've written a lot over there. And one of the things that I've written over there has to do with the phenomena of Spencer Pratt and whether or not getting millions of likes on social media translates to getting votes in actual Los Angeles. I think that a lot of the money that he's raising is coming from low dollar donors around the country who are being inspired by what he's doing. But at the end of the day, math does matter. And I'm guessing that the turnout for Republicans in the LA mayor's race, I had originally said would be 16%. I might notch that up to 18 or 19% based on, some of the turnout numbers. And so I do agree Pratt was great in the debate. I also think virtually nobody in Los Angeles was watching the debate. Unfortunately, it got pretty low ratings. So anyway, so the question's going to be, will the money that Pratt raised help him to get his message out to actual likely voters? And again, Pratt doesn't need to get the most votes. He might. I mean, if the survey that Jim doubts is remotely accurate, then that race is, I mean, especially when you start to add a margin of error, it's basically a three-way race. So it's entirely possible that Pratt could be the top vote getter. The odds of Spencer Pratt getting 51% and winning in June, in my opinion, I never say zero. So we're going to say less than 1%. There's just too many Democrats in that city and too many choices. Disaffected Democrats have someone they can vote for that is not Spencer Pratt. They can vote for Nithya Raman. The question is going to be, obviously, which two candidates go into the runoff? And then in the general election, I'll just frame it this way for Los Angeles, right? The general election strategy will be, and mark my words, you'll be able to watch it. It's going to be the same thing that is going to play out if Hilton makes the runoff for governor. It's the same thing that played out with Prop 50. It's going to be a Trump theme over and over again. And last week, President Trump said he didn't know Spencer Pratt, but heard good things about him, heard he's a MAGA guy, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see that video over and over and over again as they attempt to simply make the mayor's race in November not a referendum on tons of trash, a referendum on tons of homeless, a referendum on lack of police, a referendum on lack of operative streetlights, a referendum on a city that is losing its Hollywood business, a referendum on a city that's watching its school district atrophy students as people move out of the city or choose to take their children out of the public school system, a city that is not remotely prepared for the LA Olympics, not remotely prepared for the World Cup. All of these problems will all be shoved to the side as Mayor Bass refuses to do any debates. And it becomes a referendum on Donald Trump over and over again. To me, what would be the most interesting outcome in Los Angeles in June, based on this survey results, wouldn't it be something if Karen Bass didn't make the runoff? And in fact, the runoff was between Raman and Pratt. And I will make this final point on the LA mayor's race, which is that if you're not sure what's going on, ask yourself, what are the unions doing? Because I guarantee you the unions are doing daily trackers now. I mean, obviously surveys, and for those of you who don't know, a daily track is where every night you're out doing a couple hundred of completed surveys. And so you go back, 3 or 4 days and you've got a sample universe of about 800 people and you keep rolling it. And you're trying to constantly make sure that the track is representative of the expected remaining vote, and then you're weighting it and you're trying to say to yourself, what does the survey tell you? And right now what you're not seeing is the unions doing a vast amount of boosting of Karen Bass. I see them helping to boost Pratt, right? Because their play, right, is they would like it to be a Republican on Democrat in November in a Democrat stronghold like Los Angeles. They would like that. But what you're not seeing is a vast GOTV for Karen Bass. And, hold on a minute, my screen went dark again. 1 minute, sorry, operator error. Here we go. What you're not seeing is a huge GOTV effort for Karen Bass, and that tells you two things. It tells you, number one, they don't see her ability to win outright. Because if they thought that they could reelect the mayor outright, they would reelect the mayor. And just so that everybody doesn't remember, as we all sit around saying to ourselves, well, why would they want to reelect Karen Bass? She sucks. She's not good at anything. She's good at one thing. She's good at striking deals with the public employee unions and diverting all the tax dollars into lucrative pay, salary, benefits, and work conditions for city employees. And so they back her. Even the police union has endorsed and is strongly backing Mayor Bass for reelection because that's what the unions do, right? That's what happens at the state level, right? The unions, I was talking to this about somebody the other day. Look at high-speed rail. By any of the metrics that we would use, high-speed rail is a tremendous disaster. It was promised to be the high-speed trail from Anaheim to San Francisco. It was going to cost a relatively small amount of money, and it was going to be completed already. And it's none of those things, but it was never intended to be one of those things. Its purpose in actuality is it's a public works project for tens of thousands of union workers who are laying track, they're laying viaducts, they're laying elevated rail. They're just working away, building a train to nowhere and getting paid lots of money to do it, and they're perfectly happy. In fact, they wouldn't want the train to be finished because then the jobs would be over. And so I say all of that relative to Los Angeles because the unions want to keep Karen Bass in office because they don't want, obviously, Spencer Pratt, who's a massive change agent, nor are they comfortable with a real left-wing ideologue like Nithya Raman. And what will she do? Right? Nobody's sure. But it could be that Pratt and Raman go on to the general election. That would be the best case scenario, I think, for Spencer Pratt, because I think that would free up the police union to get behind Pratt because they would not want Raman, and it would create some interesting dynamic. But anyways, we'll see what happens in Los Angeles. If you live in LA, go vote for Spencer Pratt. It's been a great, interesting candidate and a change agent, and I think a lot of Democrats are going to support him. I'm just, we talk about California being 60-40, Democrat to Republican, or Trump aligned to non-Trump aligned. That would be the Prop 50 campaign. And then you go to Los Angeles and then you look at the numbers and you're like, holy hell, it's over there. It's more like 80-20 Democrats and liberals in that city. So the question is there a point at which enough Democrats go, I'm willing to not vote Democrat because I am tired of my city going to hell? I won't repeat all the list of terribles I just did a few minutes ago, but Los Angeles is in a horrible place. The question is whether or not people can take off that partisan filter when they vote. And it's unclear to me whether they can or not. So we'll just see what happens and see where it goes. And then, we're going to go from there. So let's move on to the next topic. I got to pull up my chart unless somebody wants to look on there and tell me what I promised to talk about next. Won't take me long. There I am. Substack post. All right. So now we're going to be talking about, right here we go. We're going to talk about, we talked about the governor's race. We talked about the LA mayor's race. We talked about voter turnout. Let's talk about Senate District 4. I don't know how many people are following this. I'm going to give a little primer. So Senate District 4 is kind of the Stockton area. It's Modesto area. It's a state Senate seat that is a very red seat. This is a seat that elected Donald Trump by double digits. But in 2022, it elected a Democrat to the state Senate. This is another one of those problems with Proposition 14, this top two system. There were, I think, 4 Republicans running for that seat and 2 Democrats running for that seat. And when the dust settled and the top 2 in the June election results were counted, I think it was June, the 2 Democrats took the top 2 spots. and Republicans were locked out of the general election. And that meant that a Democrat was elected to be the new state senator for that seat. Hold on one second, guys. I'm trying to pull up. There's something I want to do on my screen sharing here, and we're going to see if I'm technically proficient enough to do it. So Senator Alvarado Gil was the Democrat who won. Oh, let me just finish the prep. Senator Alvarado Gil was won that seat, and this is where you get the big. So I don't know her very well. I've met her before. This is not okay. You tell me if this would shock you. A Democrat gets elected to a Republican state Senate seat that Donald Trump won by close to 20 points. I mean, it's a really, I think close to 20, certainly more than 10, maybe as close as 20. Very red seat. So she knows she's dead woman walking, running for reelection. She would tell you her narrative is that she got to Sacramento, couldn't believe how horrible the Democrats were, and lo and behold, at the urging of the Republican Party, she changed from Democrat to Republican. And now she's running for reelection as a Republican. And as I said, she would tell you that's from a heartfelt transformation that she has had occur, that she feels much more aligned with the Republican Party than the Democrat Party. A cynic, I happen to be a cynic, would tell you she made a change for survival, right? This is not somebody who, if she stayed as a Democrat, could have been reelected to this seat. So she became a Republican. And I would tell you this, in Sacramento, Republicans are in the super minority. So you want every Republican that you can get. So this Senator Alvarado Gil re-registers from Democrat to Republican, starts voting like a Republican, right? And is welcomed into the Republican Party by, the Senate Republican caucus, all those people are like, we want you, come and join us. And so now you get this interesting dynamic where we're heading into a Republican primary or into the regular race, I'd say, where Republican voters get to decide. They have to look at it and say, do we like the job she's doing? Do we believe that she became a Republican because she had an epiphany? Or do we think that she's a Democrat who knows that her chance for reelection requires to be a Republican? And if she gets elected, then she's facing term limits. Will she then revert to being the liberal that she was before she got elected to the state Senate in the first place? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I do know that it's an interesting dynamic where you now have Republicans in Sacramento, and maybe even the party itself, that have endorsed this Democrat turned Republican, but she's facing a very, very spirited and well-financed campaign for her reelection. Hold on a minute. I am going to do this. Let me find this mailer that I want to share with you all. That's not the one I want to share because this is the controversy that came up. There it is. All right. Wish me luck as I share my screen. Let's see if this works. Share screen. And we're going to share. Which one I'm going to share? Share a window. I'm going to share this window. Let's see if it works. All right. This should be working. And if it's working, everyone is looking at a piece of political mail that was put out. Marie Alvarado Gil, I told you, is the incumbent. And this is a piece of mail that was put out by Duarte, Alexandra Duarte. There's her there with which we'll come back to this in a minute, firing her semi-automatic handgun on the Republican red can. Anyways, so Duarte, who is the wife of former Congressman Duarte, who lost his reelection in 2024, but his wife is now running as a conservative Republican for this seat, basically saying, this is our chance for the party to elect someone that we believe in. She believes she's that candidate. So she's got this piece of mail that she's put out. Notice from your senator, Marie Alvarado Gil, and they have all of the photos that she has taken in her previous life. Before she decided to become a Republican, she was for free health care for illegal immigrants. She was for tampons in boys' bathrooms. She was for vaccine mandates. And she actually apparently said, I am an effing Democrat. I understand it's all important. These are all based on research done allegedly by the Duarte campaign. And then on the back, we have these cans for a recipe. You got Alexandra Duarte, the Trump Republican. She's a Trump supporter, tough on illegal immigration, tough on crime, parents' rights champion. And then we have in the other can, Republican, Marie Alvarado Gil, whose ingredients are called herself an effing Democrat, doesn't support President Trump, loves Joe Biden, holds hands with Kamala Harris, gives free health care to illegals, put tampons in boys' bathrooms, make abortions easier to get, mandated vaccines, supports lockdowns. First, Newsom's, I can't even, I need glasses. She supported she let Newsom's gerrymander pass. I'm not sure that's fair. Facing explosive sexual harassment litigation, and that's just the start. Um, Anyways, then at the bottom it says, well, it kind of repeats all that. But none of that is why I'm putting this piece of mail in front of you. I'm putting this piece of mail in front of you because I assume the consultants for Gil, who I believe it's my friend Tim Rosales, a good guy. I love Tim. But I think Tim is the consultant for Republican Marie Alvarado Gil. And they saw this mail piece and they decided to blow it up and make it some sort of sensational attack on Alvarado Gil. And the center point of their attack, if you look at this picture, is that somehow that firearm that is pointed midway to the Alvarado Gil can is actually a violent attack on Marie Alvarado Gil. And they put out condemnations, they put out earned media, they got media to write a story. And if this isn't the most contrived bullshit that I've ever heard, so if I was doing like a liar liar, this would get like the 4 Pinocchios. This is just a regular piece of mail, and they're trying to show that Alexander Duarte is a Second Amendment supporter. And like I said, these aren't even lined up, if you can see my pointer. So I think it's really crap. But lo and behold, let me bring this for you so that you could see it. Oh, now you can see my inbox, but that's not what I'm trying to bring up here. Hold on a minute. Let's see if I can find down here. This is it right here. No, that's not it either. Hold on a minute. I've got this email that I received, and I've got to find it for you. There it is. There it is. I got an email from Brian Jones, the Senate Republican leader. And he says, John, I've just learned of a dangerous and desperate attack ad against a fellow Republican senator. Remember, this is the senator that was elected as a liberal Democrat, and then she changed after she got elected in this very Trumpy district. And a leader in the race for California's 4th Senate District, Marie Alvarado Gil. Senator Gil is a rising star in the Senate and her opponent, the wealthy wife of a former member of Congress. Yeah, one that we all supported, a great guy, has resorted to dangerous attack mailers that depict her shooting a firearm toward a picture of the senator. There is no place for political violence in our society. It is not what we stand for as Republicans and not who we are as California. And, and by the way, then he invokes Charlie Kirk's assassination, right? And then at the end of the day, now it's a help us by pitching in money. And again, we're going to come back to this again. This is what we're talking about, folks. A gun pointed at a can has now become a Charlie Kirk level violence in campaigning mailer. So I'm going to end this little rant by saying 2 things. Number one is that I would tell you that I have my own doubts about Marie Alvarado Gil. I don't know her, but she had every opportunity to be a Republican and run as a Republican in the first place. She was a Democrat and ran as a Democrat. And by the way, she's probably a front runner in this race. And because she'll get all the Democrat, I guarantee you, she's sending mail to the Democrats saying, I was elected as a Democrat. Now, and she's mailing to Republicans. But, Duarte's the lifelong Republican. So if I was in that district, with all due respect to Marie Alvarado Gil, I'd be voting for Duarte 100 times over the principle of not letting a Democrat who snuck through on the open primary re-register herself, call herself now a conservative, and get my vote. I'm too cynical to actually believe in that. So anyways, that's what's going on there, and I thought it was worth bringing up. And again, Marie Alvarado Gil may be a very nice person. The problem is the circumstances are such that I could never possibly believe that her re-registration was not cynical and pretty much motivated by the fact that she had no way to get reelected as a Democrat. So, anyways, let me figure out how to unshare my screen. Let me get to a few comments. I'm going to go back for Red Fire here, and also for Janice Koppel. I did a podcast with Michael Gates. Michael Gates is actually the only candidate running for statewide office who I endorsed already. And so, so of course, I encourage you to vote for Michael Gates. Michael Gates has the advantage over all of these other people. He's the only Republican on your ballot. So Michael Gates deserves your vote. He doesn't need your vote, but he deserves your vote if you're looking for a conservative to vote for. And again, going back through, I'm supporting Gloria Romero for lieutenant governor. I'm supporting Jennifer Hawkes for treasurer. I'm supporting Herb Morgan for controller, and I'm supporting for insurance. I didn't mention Stacey K. It's a long long last name, Korsgaden, something like that. I'm embarrassed. Sorry, Stacy. Stacy is my vote for that. And as I said, Michael Gates for Attorney General. I do not have recommendations all the way down to the Superior Court level, wherever you live. And boy, Board of Equalization, 3rd District. If that's my district, I'm voting for Dennis Bilodeau. But he's also the only Republican. If you're in a different district, then then I can't really help you. So there's John Park, the esteemed vice chairman of the state Republican Party. If you want to get involved with anything that involves vice, you should reach out to John Park. Stacey Korsgaden. John, I don't know if you came on late. I talked about us being at the Dodger game last night. So you talked about at the beginning of this conversation. So anyways, that's what I have to say on the 4th District. Then I think I kind of committed to talking to myself about a little flap that has occurred relative to use of the OC of the California of just the Republican Party logo. I'm not going to be putting anything up on my screen because I wasn't prepared to do that, but let me just talk to you about it. So, Carl DeMaio is a Republican assemblyman from San Diego, very philosophically conservative guy on most issues, and is kind of the gold standard up in the Capitol for being somebody that will stand up and take on the left on the floor. We have an awful lot of Republican legislators who are very nice people, but do not get up on the floor and act like we're in the super minority where the only thing we really have going for us is our voice. Every day, our Republicans should be on the floor, not only attacking the bad idea of the Democrats, but frankly, attacking the Democrats themselves and their culture of corruption, and about how, if I was on the floor, I'd say, all of you Democrats on the floor, have you all checked in with the California Teachers Association and the other labor unions? Do you have your vote sheets in front of you? Because none of you are independent. None of you have an ability to make up your own mind, except a few left-wing liberal ideologues who we don't agree with anyway. Anyways, you could get me going. Anyway, so, but Carl DeMaio is also a political consultant. Carl DeMaio has his own slate program that he does. He gets people to buy onto it, and he puts it out statewide. You can find it at Reform California. Carl, so far as I know, the process that Carl goes through in determining who is going to be on his slate is whoever Carl wants. It's his slate. He does it. And so, it's worth looking at. A lot of my friends have been endorsed by him. There are some people on his slate that I'm not supporting because it's not the Jon Fleischman slate. It's the Carl DeMaio Reform California slate. But there was some controversy because Carl put out his slate card and he called it, if I recall correctly, kind of like your official Republican voter guide, sending it to Republicans. And he put the Republican Party logo on the mailer. So the first thing that I will say, and this was with all due respect to my friend Carl, he should not have done that. It was not right to do that. And the Republican Party logo is trademarked and it's owned by the party. And it's trademarked for a reason, which is there's an actual Republican Party endorsement process. And the Republican Party has the right to say, this is the official Republican voter guide. And you put the Republican Party logo, which you're familiar with, the blue and red elephant with the 3 stars on it, and you say, this is your official Republican voter guide. In my mind, a reasonable person would look at Carl's voter guide and assume that everyone on that guide has been endorsed by the party, and it has not been. So I don't think it was a good call for Carl to do that, especially because the remedies or the ways to do that more correctly would be to say it's a Republican voter guide. It's or it's a voter guide for Republicans, and then you don't have to change that logo much to not be using the official Republican Party logo. You can have the elephant trumpet up in the air. You can put 2 stars instead of 3. You can have 3 legs, 4 legs, 5 legs. You can change the color, but to use the official Republican Party logo, I think was a bad call. Um, but and I should say there's another group down in San Diego that has this Republican slate they've put out. They're making the same mistake, right? They're putting the official Republican logo or something so similar to it so as to not be differentiatable. That's a word. And I think a lot of it has to do with a very contested state Senate Republican, in essence, primary down there that's going on. That's a topic for another day. So the first thing I'm going to say is I think Carl was too cute by half and should not have done that. The question is whether or not the response from the party itself was an appropriate response. I am a former executive director of the state Republican Party. We had trademark violations that occurred on our watch, and our typical way of dealing with it was the first thing we did was assess the actor. We said, who's doing this? And in this case, it's a Republican state legislator. It's somebody who's very close with the San Diego County Republican Party. So, in my opinion, had I been executive director of the party, had I been chair of the party, my action would have been a phone call, followed up with an email. And if we'd gotten an assurance that, hey, you know what? Thanks for calling us out on this. It won't happen again. We won't mail anymore. I probably would have asked for them to send that to us in email and called it a day. And I probably would have put out a public statement of saying that there is a Republican slate. This is it, and you move on. What the party basically did was they went to DEFCON 2. They didn't file a lawsuit, but they sent a really hard hitting legal law letter. Hitting DeMaio. I haven't seen anything similar go to the other group that's doing it online, basically doing the same thing. And I think if you read between the lines, what you're really seeing is there's friction, to call it mildly, between Corinne Rankin, the president, the chairman of the state Republican Party, and Carl DeMaio. There is no love lost between them. As a matter of fact, Carl has been pretty critical of them. As I recall, I did a podcast with my friend Carl, and Carl is a friend. About halfway through the show, he referred to the state Republican Party as a dumpster fire. So he's not a fan of the party, what they do, how they operate. He's not a fan of the chair. And so I could see where, because of the frosty attitude, maybe they felt like we're going to use this as a moment to go all in on it. I wouldn't have done it that way, but that's kind of what happened. I don't know if Carl's lawyers responded to their lawyer letter. I don't know if they discontinued using the logo or not, but I've had enough people ask me about it that I thought I would at least explain what happened, what occurred, what's going on with that. And again, to come back to it, Carl had a different way he could have done that. And I think in the future, he should do it a different way. The party has its right to have its official endorsed candidates, and it's not okay for another slate to come out to purport to be the party. And that's what you do. I mean, it'd be like somebody putting a car dealer's a car, it'd be like I have a store that sells aftermarket Honda products, and I wanted to put on it, these are the official products of Honda. And I put that on my mailer, even though they're not made by Honda, they're aftermarket products. Honda Motors would be on their ass in a minute, suing them, saying, you can't call your products official Honda products. I mean, you could put in your mailer photos of Hondas with your things on it. You could say, we are the official aftermarket Honda producers of, whatever they want to say, but you can't use somebody's trademark logo that way. It doesn't work in the business sector, and it doesn't work in the political sector. All right. That having been said, let's take a quick peek and see if there's anything else that I promised to cover before I call this Second Amendment. I promised that I would cover the Second Amendment, and so Jim Lacey, by the way, reports that the lawyer for the party told him, by the way, Jim Lacey is also a slate vendor. Jim has never committed a trademark violation, nor would he. Jim, if you ever commit a trademark violation, you have to come onto my program and explain to yourself. He says that Carl stopped using the trademarks without permission after they sent their legal cease and desist letter. So I guess that situation is resolved until the next time somebody does it. Anyways, let's talk about the Second Amendment real quick. I wrote about this, but I think it's important to remember. First and foremost, the good news is and I could do an entire podcast on this. I'm going to try to keep this fairly short, but I think that it's important to remember that fortunately for us here in California, we are part of America. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And because of that, our Second Amendment rights in the United States Constitution, rights that protect us from the government, are in effect here. And so we have the right to keep and bear arms, and that right shall not be infringed. And I will tell you, we have an aggressive, progressive California legislature that every single session tries to come up with more ways to figure out how to infringe on our Second Amendment rights. And so what we end up with is a rinse, wash, repeat situation of outrageous bills being passed by the legislature, and then our friends in the Second Amendment community going to court to defend our rights and rinse, wash, repeat over and over again. So there's another bill that's come down the road here that I think patently is unconstitutional, but of course they'll pass it anyway, because then they just fund lots of aggressive lawfare by Attorney General Bontagate Bonta, and they'll keep fighting for it. And again, I could talk. I've done. If you go into again my archive button at sodoesitmatter.com and type in gun rights, Second Amendment, I have written a lot on legal challenges that are going on, gun cases that are going on. I have had I did a podcast interview with Chuck Michel, the volunteer president and legal counsel for the California Rifle and Pistol Association. I actually recently did a podcast as well with their legislative advocate, their lobbyist, which is a great podcast to watch. And so what I would tell you is that there's a new piece of legislation that is currently underway, and it works like this. I'll look up the bill number because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I just wrote about it, so I'll be able to. Matter of fact, I'm scrolling down here to get it for you. But all right, so let's talk about what this bill does. It's 8 something. Maybe if somebody's got the bill number, they can put it up there. But what this legislation does is right now, if you own a gun, you have had to get a little firearms permit that the state requires you to have. It's basically, think about the written version of the DMV test, but easier. So there's like 40 questions on a survey. You can miss only a certain number of them. Basically, when you go into a gun shop, if you want to buy a firearm, they will give you a booklet or a couple sheets of paper to read so you can cram and understand all the answers to these questions. It's very basic firearms operations, ownership, safety questions. And then after you've studied it for a sufficient amount of time and you're ready, they hand you the kind of the true false multiple choice test, and you take it, and you're likely to pass it. If you don't, you know what you got wrong, you study that, and they give it to you again. And then of course you have your 10-day waiting period, and then you can pick up your firearm, right? So that's what you go through now. And there's a fee associated with it. It's like, I want to say it's 30 something bucks. It's an onerous fee because you shouldn't have to pay a fee to exercise your constitutional right, but nevertheless, the fee is there. And so I did not say Gus for public instruction. I said for public instruction, that is Sonia Shaw, like 100 times over again, Sonia Shaw. Gus does not have the kind of campaign that will allow him to win that race. And by the way, you need to vote in that race because that's the only race on the ballot in June that is decided on a 50% plus one. If somebody gets 50% plus one, that race is over. So that having been said, getting back to this gun, so everyone has to get this permit, right? Or pass this test and get their little safety card. And then the card's good for a couple of years, so you don't have to do it again. But if you wait long enough, you will. So they decided to add this new piece of gun control. They've decided to add a new law that says you still need to get the card, but getting the card's now a little bit harder. They're going to now require, I'm just going to say what the bill says now. It's been changed from what was introduced. You have to go through a 4-hour training from a licensed firearm instructor before you can get the card. You have also that training has to include range time, an hour of range time shooting a gun and showing your proficiency before you can get the card to get the gun. So obviously this raises a whole bunch of questions, not the least of which is, how do you get a gun to do the live fire training if you can't get a gun because you don't have the card? That's obviously dumb, right? Um, and then on top of it, there's now going to be new fees, right, that are involved. And of course, you need to have enough licensed training people that are able to train. You have to have enough range time. And then when I wrote about this, my sample scenario that I used, which I put in a kind of a satire political cartoon, was what happens if you're, say, a female nurse, you want to work at a emergency room hospital in a tough area because that's where your calling is to serve. You want to live near the hospital so you can walk to the hospital. So you don't live in a great neighborhood. And so you decide you want to have a gun in your home for personal protection, right? But now you find out that in order to get the firearm, you got to figure out how to take time off of work to be able to take the class. You got to figure out who you can borrow a firearm from in order to take the class, or you got to rent one for the class, which probably adds to the cost of the class. You got to go through all of this stuff just to be able to get the card before you can buy the car, before you can purchase the firearm, where you then have to wait 10 days to receive the fire. The whole thing is just a mess, and it's unfortunate, and it's really horrible gun control, and it's totally unconstitutional. But it doesn't change the fact that they passed this stuff. They don't even care if it's unconstitutional. They're going to send it into the court system, and they're going to push as hard as they can. This is something that they do over and over again on gun control legislation. They push as hard as they can. They hope to get some part of it upheld. And then the last part of the bill that's worth mentioning, because it's also stupid, is this requirement applies to you. So let's say you move into California with a firearm. So you've already got a firearm. You move into California, you are required under this bill to go get that firearms card, take the class, do the live training within, I want to say it's 180 days now in the law, and you are potentially subject to a misdemeanor if you don't do it. Well, you tell me if anybody's going to even know if anything, you let me know if anybody is stopping you at the border to say, hey, do you have fruits, vegetables, or a firearm in your car? Oh, you have a firearm? Let's make you aware of this law that you don't know about. The whole thing is dumb. It's all stupid. Of course, it's on autopilot. All the Democrats are voting for it. By now, I'm sure it's passed the state Senate. When I first wrote about it, it was on the floor of the state Senate to be voted for after having passed in committee. We're so outnumbered in the state Senate. There's one Republican on the Public Safety Committee, my Senator, Kelly Steyer. He voted no. I think that then moved on to, maybe it was the Appropriations Committee. I'm not sure, the second committee of interest. And that, I think, had two Republicans on it, Megan Dolly and again Kelly Steyer, who voted no. All the Democrats are voting yes on this legislation. So look for it to go to the Assembly. Look for it to pass there, because they really don't care. Sorry, hold on a minute. My screen went dark again. They really don't care if it's constitutional or not. So that's the Second Amendment latest bill that's going on. This stuff happens all the time. So I would tell you this. I would tell you to go to the first of all, I love gun owners of California. They are awesome. I've been affiliated with them, partners with them, done projects with them over the years. You should be a member there, Gun Owners of California. You should definitely be going to the California Rifle and Pistol Association. I'm a donor there. I not only am I a member, but I contribute extra to help fund their legal efforts. But on their website, they've got a great place where you can go to sign up to oppose this legislation, and you enter in your information, and it sends a letter to your representative. So crpa.org, you should go over there and follow all these groups online. So with that, we are bumping up on an hour, which is about the limit as I like to go on these, because we will bottle this up and then we put it on the site. Hundreds of you are watching it now, but it'll go to thousands, I'm happy to report, and I really want to get the word out about who to vote for. I will finish up with my very talkative keyboard friend, Redfire, who who wants to know about a movement to repeal Prop 47, don't hold your breath. It's very difficult to fund law enforcement measures. That's not going to come through the legislature. So that would have to get 1.5 million signatures from voters. Very hard to do, especially, I mean, the proper order is elect a new attorney general first, right? You got to elect Michael Gates, because the power that the attorney general in California has to put the title and summary on a ballot measure is awfully powerful. And so look for them to, even if you gathered signatures to repeal Prop 47, they'd probably call it the Kill Innocent Puppies Act and make it really hard to pass. Anyways, we'll talk more about ballot measures as we get into the fall, but it's now too late for any ballot measures. If you have not turned in signatures for the general election for a citizen-initiated measure for statewide, you're not going on the ballot. And so if there is a repeal of Prop 47, there have been some people talking about a real repeal of Prop 14. If the legislature doesn't put those on the ballot, they've got a little more time. Otherwise, look to 2028. Anyways, thanks everybody for participating. Before you go, hit the heart button. That helps my algorithms and gets people hit the little heart button to say that you like this if you like it. And then this will get published so you can share it when it does if you enjoyed it. I encourage you to share it and tell people that you watched it. And then other than that, I really appreciate you spending some time with me. And like I said, we'll be getting you information out about a live event to take place Wednesday of next week, where we'll try to figure what we can from the partial results from the election. See ya. Take care.